A very good evening to all our viewers today. Today we have with us a very special guest coming from a very beautiful country. Mr. Sandeep is a sustainability professional, educator, and researcher. He specializes in business modeling, ESG, and impact investing. He has worked in private as well as not for profit sectors in the USA and Nepal and is a faculty member at the Kathmandu University School of Education and King's College, Nepal. He has a degree in MBA and is currently a MPhil in development studies, focusing on education in sustainability and CSR and ESG. Welcome on our show, Sandeep.
Hi, good evening and namaste. Thank you for having me here.
It's an honor to have you with us from the beautiful land of Nepal. Now, you have been working in the impact investment and ESG space with Dolma Advisory in Nepal. What, according to you, are the challenges and opportunities in the space of ESG?
Yes, so I work for Dolma Advisors. We are advisors for Dolma Impact Fund 1 and 2 that's based in Mauritius. So we invest in private sectors through private equity and FDI in Nepal in sectors like renewable energy, healthcare, and technology. So there are obviously a lot of challenges because this sector is pretty new in Nepal. The concept of whole ESG is new in Nepal. Also, there are a lot of capacity gaps in Nepal. So understanding what's ESG, finding the right people, right expertise, right resource person in Nepal to implement ENS and advise on ENS or like uptake ENS is pretty new, and the talent is now starting to be developed with a lot of technical assistance program in Nepal. But then there are a lot of opportunities too. So for our fund, we started that 8 years ago. So we are running in our eighth year. So we are kind of like pioneers in the ESG field in Nepal. And lately, the government of Nepal or the central bank has also introduced the ENS risk management framework for banks, which is a positive steps. So there is a lot of awareness happening in terms of ENS. So uptaking ENS now or ESG or sustainability now, what it really does for private sector is help them become a market leader in this field, and then also it helps in safeguarding various risks. That's very important for financial return, and then also there's a lot of opportunities for impact. So we are focused on like technical assistance, capacity building, and then through my education also I'm focusing more on adding value to the field, so I can educate more people on ENS and help them like develop their careers and programs in terms of ENS.
That's wonderful. Now, it's a striking question for you. Although there is a lot of importance been given from the government side, do the investors from inside Nepal are also emphasizing on ESG related reporting, or is it just for getting the foreign direct investment?
So I would say it initially started with FDI investments in Nepal. So we have investors. So we bring in like ESG standards. So we develop the ESG framework, risk management system, and we practice that, right? So that also translates to our portfolio companies, and who are also doing a wonderful job of managing ENS and then like pioneering that sector. And one thing that really helps is these companies, when they are represented in conferences or webinars or seminars to talk about their ENS, like accomplishments or challenges, what it does is it also helps other players in the country to understand what it means and how it adds value to them. So lately, what we are also seeing is local private equity funds that also have shifted their focus on ENS. So it's not that it's only like companies with FDI investment that's focusing on ENS or banks with for international investors, but then local firms are also focusing on that. And then there's also like other companies that's focusing on sustainability, so they may not term it ESG like we do, but there are like companies that's focusing on sustainability or SDGs, who design their programs or the CSR activities along those lines. and we have seen few companies that's focusing on their sustainability reporting. There was a airlines in Nepal that went carbon neutral. So we do see a lot of these activities happening in Nepal. So it's really taking shape, and there are a lot of events and capacity building programs being organized in Nepal. A lot of it is being supported by donors and DFIs to help the country like scale up in terms of ENS. So setting up system, setting up the manpower, resources, training, site visits, exposures, all that thing. So it is helping a lot, especially in the private sector. And what we have also seen lately is that a lot of INGOs are also focusing on ENS, in terms of risk management. So they have started recruiting ENS officers. They have started developing their ENS framework, risk management framework. So they're moving away from the traditional safeguarding side to more active risk management. And then we have also seen that a lot of vacancies now being created in banking industries, especially because the central bank is requiring banks to have dedicated ENS resources, and that's part of their screening process. So there is a lot of that vacancies being created also.
That's wonderful to learn the scale at which it is growing in Nepal as well. Uh, Now, when you all are making investment decisions, are the investments made only in the listed companies or large scale or MSME companies who have some structure to them? Or are you all also investing in startups and entrepreneurs who are working towards achieving sustainable development goals or ESG? And if so, what kind of criteria do you look at in each one of them?
Okay, so for the fund that I work at, we are investing in both private and public companies. So we have our various mandate, and we focus on three specific industries sectors. That is renewable energy, that could be hydropower or solar energy, healthcare, and then technology. Right. So we are investing in that. Some companies could go public, or some could be an existing public company, and then we could potentially exit through an IPO. And some companies could always remain to be a private company. So it really depends on the strategy. So our investment is solely in private equity. Uh, so that's how we have been investing right now in these three focus areas.
Okay. So, if I may ask, what are the parameters that you consider before you invest in terms of E, S, and G independently?
Okay, so that's a very good question. So we have a investment process where ENS is very aligned. So what we basically do is pre-investment, we do a screening, to ensure that it's not in our exclusion list. So once we qualify for that, we also look at initially we started with the ENS assessment. So in the ENS assessment, we try to identify red flags in a particular deal and see that if it's going to fit our metrics, like our mandate. So once we do that and then we get the approval for investment, we go to for a detailed due diligence, ENS due diligence. So we cover a lot of things. So I'll try to cover it as comprehensively as I can. So we basically follow the IFC performance standards and also the standards that's important for our investors and for the fund. So ILO core labor standards, terms of employment, human rights for business, these kind of things. So we look at it individually and then also collectively. And more recently, we have started also like adding, looking at climate change risk and then gender. So basically, in terms of environment management or environmental risk, what we're doing is we're following the IFC performance standards. So we are looking at biodiversity, aquatic life impact on forestry, ecosystem services. Social side, we are looking at indigenous people, cultural heritage, workers, employment, health and safety, community well-being, community safety, all that thing. So there are various parameters that we look into during the due diligence process to identify risk. Also, we look very carefully at country level risk and sector specific risk that could exist. So, a risk in a hydropower sector could be completely different from a healthcare industry. So, we look at that. We also look at resource efficiency and impact. So, along that line, what we have also started doing is one is the ENS risk management. So, how do we identify risk and how do we identify mitigation measures in that? And second is the impact. So what are the positive impact that our investment can create in a particular company, or even it could bring a paradigm shift, so we look at it from that perspective. Another is now this is more recent. It's we are looking at climate change risk. So how would climate change impact business, so we try to identify that and how can we manage that in case of anything, if to manage the climate change risk. And we are moving towards climate change disclosure also. So this is a work in progress that we are working on. We do along with the ENSDD due diligence, we also do human rights due diligence. So how is company that we're going to invest in, what kind of human rights adverse impact could it have, so if there are, like, how do we manage that or mitigate that? That's very carefully looked at. Also, we are now looking at a gender. So um, that's more for value creation and gender smart investing. So the mix of employment in the portfolio, mix of female shareholding, what kind of consumers they have, their product line, if it's catered to women or not. And then also we are slowly looking to see how we can support the companies to be more gender inclusive and more diverse in terms of their operations, so that would be one aspect of impact that we would be looking at. So these are basic things that we would look into. And in terms of governance, we have few processes as well. So we do a corporate governance due diligence on a particular company. To compliance is done by the legal due diligence, but we are looking at the commitment of the board. How do we structure it? How does it going to create value? What would be the roles and responsibilities? So we look at that. And then along that line, we also conduct a business integrity due diligence. So in that, one component would be integrated due diligence check of maybe key promoters or shareholders, PEP check, AML, CFT checks, all that thing.
Yeah, hi.
And then how do we
There is.
yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry, there was a network error. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, yeah.
okay.
I can hear you.
Okay. So when did you lose me?
No, I can hear you. Everyone can hear you.
Oh, okay. All right. So yeah. So we then have this business integrity due diligence also. That's to help us identify what kind of business integrity risk there might be, and what kind of safeguard measures or policies that the company would need to develop and how they practice it. So it's very comprehensive process that we have, and based on the risk, it's approved for final approval by our investment committee. Then after that, what we have is various action plan that would go into the shareholding agreement. And then we do follow up frequently. We work with the portfolio companies to enhance their knowledge, help them with recruitment, help them with selection. We provide technical assistance to help them scale up, and then also work with the board, senior management, and at employee level to help them really integrate ESG in their functionalities.
Okay, that's a lot of work that y'all are doing out there. Is it purely because of the financial reasons, or is there some CSR and sustainability law also from the government, and also a compliance perspective?
Okay, it's interlinked in some ways also, but this is our investment mandate. So we follow this as our investment mandate to manage ENS risk and then also create a positive impact. So we work from that front. but there are like separate CSR laws by the government, and then there are like regulatory requirements. And what we have also seen is when we are tracking ESG or our impact matrices, what it also allows to do is look at any deviation that might be occurring. So if there are like deviations, then we can identify like what's going wrong, why it's happening, what could be a root cause for that, and how do we work with the portfolio companies to address that. So it works in it's I would say it's very complementary. So what we do also helps with legal compliances and that sort. So licenses, permits, all that thing. And then also what it does is ensure that before we go to invest, we are aware about all the not just the ENS risk, but then also the legal and regulatory requirements that there might be. And then like what stage is the company at in meeting those. Because if they do not meet that, then it would be a big regulatory and compliance hassle for us and our investors. So we try to identify that and proactively look into managing that. But then there's a separate requirement for CSR that's through the government.
That's very encouraging. Now, what are the jobs option or career options in Nepal for the students pursuing CSR, sustainability, and ESG? What all options have been open?
Okay, so I think I'll talk a little bit about CSR laws. So our Industrial Enterprise Act, they have this provision for various companies or sectors to allocate certain percentage to CSR funds. So depending on medium, large, or small enterprises, for especially for small enterprises, if the annual turnover is 150 million Nepali rupees, then 1% of the annual profit would have to be go towards CSR activities. And if it's for medium, medium is $100 million, sorry, 100 million Nepali rupees or more, and large is if it's over 200 million of fixed assets rupees. Then they would have to contribute 1% of their annual profit to CSR activities. And for banks, there's also a criteria. If 1% of their net profit has to go towards CSR funds. But there's a little bit of unclarity in the regulation also, because it doesn't really define what's the annual profit. So it's like open to interpretation, and where would the funds go. So there are like certain guidelines, but then it's not that very clear. So really figuring that out is a challenge. But then these kind of companies do have to allocate CSR funds. But then again, in terms of other companies that may not fit this requirements, they could have their own CSR component. Just out of goodwill or as a responsible business, they would want to do CSR activities. So there's that. Another thing is talking about career now. So I do teach this students in masters in sustainable development. So it's designed really to bring like build that capacity or knowledge or manpower in sustainable development. Excuse me. So what happens is like they uh, so they take courses in social component, environmental component, climate change, sustainable development, basics of sustainable development, sociology, all that thing, and leadership. So it's kind of helping them understand what goes into ENS or sustainability, and then they can shape their career. So what we generally tend to see is people aligned more in going towards the non-profit sectors, towards NGO or INGO when they particularly like take that subjects. But now also what we are seeing is there's a lot of demand in private sectors also. So in private sector, it's a bit challenging because they might want specific skills that they would want like people with environmental studies or sociology. So there is that opportunities being created. And then also, besides direct career or employment, what we are also seeing is there's a lot of design workshops happening in Nepal. So a lot of youths, they have started companies that has integrated sustainability in their business. So there is sustainability consulting. Maybe it's not a full scale sustainability. They probably would not cover all the 17 SDGs, but they would potentially focus on a particular component of ESG. So we are seeing that. Also, what we're seeing is a lot of entrepreneurs, especially like coming out of MBA or business schools, are focusing on enterprises that's more social. So they're focusing on more sustainable entrepreneurship, social entrepreneurship. So that's also creating a lot of awareness and opportunities for individuals. And besides that, like I said, like there's a big resource gap in Nepal in terms of expertise and knowledge. So if you have such expertise, such education, such exposure, then you have a big opportunity to work as an international level or a national level consultant too. So there is this path being created. And another big area that there's a potential for is in health and safety in Nepal, because the health and safety laws are quite relaxed. It's not that comprehensive, but then it's also a big risk and a big opportunity to not only like safeguard, but then also create value and increase revenue for companies and efficiency, productivity. So what that would do is get a lot of qualified people to work in the health and safety sectors. One thing that we do see is a lot of Nepalese have migrated abroad to work in oil and gas industry or like big construction companies in the Middle East or in Southeast Asia. So there's also a big opportunity to repatriate them back to Nepal. So they have learned critical skills, they have like international exposure. So getting them back to Nepal and then having them contribute and work in this field would really create value, and then it would really help step up that standards within Nepal, or at least for the companies. So there are a lot of things happening.
Wonderful. Now, that's very inspiring to see the development and the opportunities that Nepal is providing to the students in sustainability and CSR. What is your vision of ESG in the coming 5 years in Nepal? How do you see it shaping?
I think it will continue to grow. I think we'll have a lot of resources and manpower and then more interest. So what I do usually see is a lot of colleges do ask me to come and like talk about ESG and sustainability, what it means. I think personally also what I really want to get into is build that uh, capacity in terms of sustainability for the youth and for companies. So get more into like courses, help students or like young entrepreneurs understand what is ESG, how they look into it, factor in that. And one thing that's really missing in Nepal is we have the academics bit that's like now starting to flourish. Like people are interested in ESG, sustainability. There are like in business school, there are like courses or like classes in social entrepreneurship. So these things are happening. So uh, what is missing is research articles. So that's really like that's going to show like what's happening in the country in terms of sustainability or ESG in Nepal. So that component is missing, which is very important in not just academically but also to generate that practice. And second is courses. So we do not have very defined courses in ESG. So it could be a single component that could be talked about, but then how do you build that overall vast? How do you cover the vast aspect of ESG? So bringing that in would be very crucial. A third thing I would say is case studies. So we generally tend to rely on foreign research or case studies of maybe like New York Stock Exchange or London Stock Exchange, and then see like, okay, ESG really does wonder. But then we don't have such case studies in Nepal. So really working with companies that have been practicing ESG or sustainability, doing their case study, showing the value creation side of it and how it benefits businesses and the society in as a whole, and the economy. I think that would be very valuable. So really working towards that line, getting more researchers, more case studies, more examples, would really help Nepal in the next 5 years. And what we have also seen is the central bank very actively also updating their risk management framework for the country. So it was launched a few years ago, but a few months ago they just launched a new framework. So what it does is it's also showing that the central bank is very proactive. So we can see that these positive steps are being taken, and a lot of resources is being spent on capacity building, which hopefully would like help bridge this gap. Another area that I see is hydropower sectors specifically. Are there more focusing on ESG now because of two reasons? One is they could have foreign investors or foreign debt, which requires them to like look into ESG factors. Another thing is also the ministry has created a EIA manual for hydropower project. That's stepping away from the traditional EIA guidelines, and it's more designed for hydropower companies to look at from an international perspective. Like not EIA, environmental impact assessment, but environmental and social impact assessment. So it's really helping scale up the industry as a whole also. So I do say that it would really start taking shape. There will be more like careers. There would be more like people looking to get into that field, not just like private sectors. A lot of public sectors and non-profit sectors would get into it. And I think we have seen a lot of conferences that includes ESG factors or ESG agenda in the conferences. And what I do see is a lot of those things would start happening. Obviously, one thing would also be beneficial is ESG reporting or sustainability reporting. So, if companies started creating that, we obviously would have the ENS management system. So within that, we have stakeholder engagement, disclosures, grievance mechanism. So how do companies become more transparent and disclose this information? So with a due time, this would also start happening.
Okay. Excellent. Now, as you mentioned about the knowledge gap and the lacuna and the skills of the people, we at IICSR are imparting trainings on sustainability, ESG, CSR, and the likes to to make responsible business leaders. So, when we have to do so, what topics do you think we can focus more, not only in India but also in Nepal? We do have some students from Nepal too.
Okay, so I think there's a lot of things to be covered, So I think, and then it also has to be strategically planned. So first is the awareness part of it, So really awareing business leaders or future business leaders or like students, help them understand what's responsible management, help them understand what's sustainability, and what do you look into. So because I get a lot of examples where my students would probably ask me, yeah, we are doing this, we are trying to achieve the SDGs, but then we are using plastic for our packaging. So how do we do that? So one really important component to understand is, just because we are in sustainability, maybe it would not be feasible to address each and every aspect of the SDGs. So that would be really difficult and it would require a lot of resources. So really helping businesses understand and develop their strategy and framework, and what would be important for their environment and their community and their workers and the business in terms of sustainability. I think that's really important. So first would be the awareness part of it, helping them understand what it means. Then we could go more into specifics. So what is environmental risk? What is social risk? What is health and safety? What is a grievance mechanism? So there are a lot of ways of doing it. And third would be impact. So how does a business look at impact? What's the impact thesis for a particular business? What could be their theory of change? So we could look into those components also. And finally, I think that would be beneficial to various companies, and then also maybe researchers or academicians would be reporting. So, how do companies or responsible businesses focus on their reporting, on their strategies? Because that's also going to help spread the word. It's going to create their brand value. So, really helping them understand the value creation out of it. So there are like a lot of ways of doing it, but then I think it's very important to first like create that awareness and then go into more specifics.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for all the excellent insights. We have our fellow panelists, Dr. Hopkins,
Mhm.
Dr. Upadhyay, Sanjay sir, and they have questions for you. So may
Okay.
I invite Dr. Hopkins to present his questions, sir? Over.
Yeah, hi. You hear me okay?
Yes, wonderful.
Well, I hear you. Lovely to hear somebody from Nepal. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Are you based in Kathmandu as you speak?
Yes, I'm in Kathmandu right now.
Oh, beautiful city. Many years since I've been there. Anyway, I
Oh,
didn't I didn't come in to talk about geography. But very excellent to hear that Nepal is so involved in ESG, CSR, however they define it. My
Mhm.
first question is, I mean, are these issues very big in Nepal? For example, what proportion of companies do something on ESG? We'll call it ESG, okay? What
Mhm.
proportion of companies in Nepal do you think? I know there's probably not much data out there, but your feeling, what proportion of companies in Nepal um, are actually uh, look at ESG, CSR sorts of issues? Is it all or a few?
I would say it's a few, not all. But what we do see is even smaller organizations they could have small CSR programs within their like budget, but then it's not fairly communicated well. They don't like publish it. This like information disclosure is kind of new in Nepal, so and companies may not have the resources to actually do that. So we do see companies doing it, but it's not like you said, like there's a lot of data gap in Nepal. So as researchers or as academician, it would be really interesting to step in that field and to like build that knowledge. So I think that's very important.
No, it's kind of interesting. I'd be interested to know what your definition
Mhm.
of CSR is. Have a look at mine one day, my definition, and see
Okay,
how it.
sure, I'll do that.
Okay, on csrfi.com, uh, and you'll see it's more of a systems approach to look at running a
Mhm.
company. But we don't want to get into that right now.
Okay.
um, what are the main economic sectors do you think are involved in ESG issues? Is it mainly services, banking, or industry,
Um,
agriculture?
Two major ones. One would be, or maybe three. One would be banks, because the central bank has a regulation on that. So even though it's fairly new, banks are required to have environmental and social risk management framework, and as part of their any credit process, they are required to complete this ENS screening and checklist. So that's one. So we are seeing a lot of vacancies and capacity building in the banking sector. Second is hydropower, because, like I said earlier, there's a lot of international financing in hydropower. So that has also really helped hydropowers like scale up in terms of ESG. So that's two. And third would be private equity sectors. So let's say fund managers. So they have started bringing in ESG practices. So like I said, like our portfolios are diverse. We have hydropower, we have solar energy, we have technology, e-commerce, we have logistics, we have hospital, we have pharmaceuticals. So these companies do have ESG practices, but I cannot generalize. Just because our portfolios has them doesn't mean like everyone would have them. But then also what we see is companies looking at ISO standards, environmental management system, or OSHA guidelines. So it does bring in some components of ESG. So we do see that happening. And another thing, not really, I wouldn't term it ESG because that would be more risk management. But in terms of agriculture, we see a lot of focus on sustainable agriculture, or climate smart agriculture. So we are seeing that trend currently.
No, very, very, very good to hear that. What one does find around the world that companies say they're doing ESG or CSR or whatever, and you find out they're doing one thing in a little corner of the office, for example, uh, making sure they dispose of plastic waste
Mhm.
properly, and everything else, employee satisfaction, management issues, and so on, are sorts of ignored. But that's my comment. Um,
Mhm.
the last thing, which is going to take you several hours to explain, but I'm, which is I'm a former model simulation model builder, um, and I'd be very interested if you could say 2 or 3 words about your business modeling. First of all, the methodology, what are the key variables, and what sort of scenarios you look at. If you can tell me all that in 3 minutes, wonderful. Thank you.
So I'll try. May not give you all the details of the right
Sure,
answers, but
sure.
so what we do is our investment process guides what we do. So what kind of risk that we look at, and what are the mitigation measures. So obviously, like you said, like there's the waste management component of it, and there is the environmental and social management system. So what we really focus on doing is internalizing ESG in the business plan of it. And we have had a lot of lessons learned from the past 8 years to really like get into it. So a few components that we do is have a designated board member that's responsible for ENS, and then get that buy-in from the promoters or the board members on ENS issues. And I wouldn't like really just call it ENS, but also like other aspects like financial, legal, human rights, like employment, all that thing. So we really focus it from the board level, so that reporting is happening at the board, at least the high risk. Then what we have companies do is set up ENS risk committees. So what we realize is that it's not only the job of a ENS officer in a particular company to look and identify and manage ENS risk. He or she could be responsible for that, but how do you also integrate people and representative from other departments to understand and like help the ENS officer identify risk and then implement the mitigation measures, safeguard measures. So that's second thing. And then how does the ENS risk committee report to the board or the senior management? So if they're like key aspect, and then because it could come down to like resource management, financial management, changing operations, changing SOPs, maybe getting experts, all that thing. So we really try to focus on that. And then what we try to do is show companies like how ENS would help create value. So that's a gap that I mentioned earlier, is that we don't really have data to support that you spending in ENS is going to help like improve your efficiency or help reduce your risk. And so a risk of shutting down a hydropower project for 10 days because of some incident could cost that company a lot of money. So really trying to gather and collect those kind of data or research and help companies understand that would be very crucial. So but we do share like internal examples and help like companies understand that. Another thing is capacity building. So we are not just focusing on the ENS person, but others within the organization to help them understand what's ENS. So just recently we went to one of our new portfolio companies and talk to them about the performance standard, talk to them about how you look at risk, how do you identify risk, what do you need to do. And what that does is like help spread that awareness, and then it would have a ripple effect within the organization, and they would be better able to create their management system. And then when they're also talking with their colleagues or the senior management, they're also aware, and they can like make the senior management responsible for the commitment also. So it's a lot of learning by doing kind of scenario right now, helping them, handholding them. And then what we initially start out is with easy hanging fruits in terms of ENS. So rather than having them accomplish big complex ENS matters, uh, identify areas that's very easy to accomplish and it would help them understand, and then have them like do it. So it has two effect. One is they would better they have a better understanding of what's ENS. They don't get scared. So when we talk about international standards, the tendency is to kind of like, oh, what is it, would I be able to do it? So if it's easy to do things, then and then when they're able to do it, they understand it better. And second is they would be more committed to do like take on other activities. And on the side, what it does is it kind of shows if the company is actually committed to these activities. So if it's a very simple ENS action plan that they need to accomplish, or let's say a um, activity, and they're not able to achieve that, kind of might show that they're really not committed to ENS. So it's also like, like testing the water. So these are like few like activities that we do.
Okay, actually, what I meant as well was mathematical modeling, but we'll talk about that another time. And I
Okay, sure.
see you have another hat, which is as a student. So
Mm-hmm.
I hope in your thesis you might talk a bit about business modeling and send me a copy of it and let me have a look at it.
Okay,
Okay.
okay, sure. Will do.
Harsh has got my coordinates. Thanks very
Okay,
much,
that's
and
good.
thanks for coming along
Thank you.
today. Very
Thank you,
interesting
Dr.
and
Hopkins.
informative.
Thank you,
Thank you
Dr.
so much,
Hopkins.
Dr. Hopkins, for the question. It's very insightful always to hear you.
Thank you.
May I invite Dr. Upadhyay to present his question, sir?
You're on mute, Dr. Upadhyay.
Uh, Thanks, Sandeep. Very nice to hear you, and very encouraging that lot is happening in ESG. CSR and sustainability has taken a center stage now, especially in social sector. A lot of things are happening, and we keep interacting with the corporates, and also in the NGO sector, a lot of new things happening. But my question to you, now we are talking a lot about climate change, and very little is being done. It's what you call a lip service, basically. What I find, how do we bring climate change into our discussions of ESG, CSR, and sustainability?
That's a very interesting question, and it's relatively new for us as well as our investors. So one thing that we are doing is creating our climate change risk management framework. And a question that I had also for our LPs is like, how do we do it? And can we also ride off on your climate change policies? Because we don't want to be in a stage where we create something and that may not, and the world has evolved so fast that it would be redundant. So we are really trying to work with our investors to define our climate change risk management strategy. So that I think is very important to get that handholding support and guidance, because they have the resources and they have the practices and knowledge. So we are starting out with that. A second thing is, what we are mostly focusing on is what would be the risks to business uh, of climate change. Climate change risks to business, rather than how would a business maybe be able to manage or like help safeguard against climate change. So there's two component or two ways of looking at it. So if I have a hydropower project, what would be the impact of climate change in my particular project in terms of power generation, revenue, safety, community, environment, all that thing. So that's one component. But another thing, like in our approach, that would be missing is how do we contribute to safeguards against climate change, or at least like contribute towards the Paris Agreement. So that's something to be considered, and it's not easy. When we look at hydropower, at least what we are doing is helping avoid greenhouse gas emission. That's in one front. But then again, like we would need a very, very, very specific guidelines if we were to also avoid or like account for like GHG emissions during the construction phase. Because the bricks that would come in, the cements that would come in, the transportation, like you're probably aware about Nepal's road, all that thing. So that has a big impact on climate change. So it's really hard to justify by building a hydropower renewable energy you are going to offset it, but it's also like helping like in the long term. So that's one way to look at it. Second thing that we are trying to do is climate change related disclosure. And since we invest in various sectors, that's where we are trying to figure it out. And little struggling is what kind of indicators do we want to set for different type of industries. Like hydropower would be different, a tech company would be different, a health hospital would be different, pharmaceutical would be different. So really, so when we think about it, it's not only us thinking like this is what we want to do, but then also think from other dimension, what would we want for our investors, and second is how do we make it easy for our portfolios to achieve that. So we could have a really wonderful complex system, but if our portfolio do not have the capacity to manage it, then it would just remain in paper. So we really need to also look into like what is achievable. So when the goals when we're setting that goals are tight, it has to be smart. So is it so we kind of want to also look at it from that front, and we don't really want to introduce something that's so complex that it would put off our portfolios. Okay, this is too complex. I don't know like how I'll so in terms of value creation, that's something that we have to uh, really consider. But it's a really emerging concept. Everyone talks about it, but then like how we actually achieve it, I think it's very hard, and especially like given lack of resources in Nepal, labs, researchers in this particular area. I think it makes it very challenging. But one good thing that we do have is a updated climate change policy in Nepal. So that's really encouraging climate change, climate financing. From it could be blended, it could be green climate fund, climate bonds, green bonds, all that thing. So that's being really prioritized. Also, one thing that we did as a activity as a student from my university was uh, uh, like a webinar on how can we make schools carbon free. So like even from academic level, we are trying to push such agenda. So that would really help climate like address climate change, but not sure like what kind of impact or like visible outcome it would have.
Sure. Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Upadhyay.
Thank you, Dr. Upadhyay, for the insightful questions. And last but not the least, Sandeep, any final message to all our viewers who are watching right now or who could watch in future?
Yeah, sure. I think thank you for joining Harsha and I for this wonderful interaction. Hopefully, like I was able to like bring in some insights from what's happening in Nepal. What are the opportunities there? How it's been shaping the industry, at least within Nepal. And there are, like I said, like there are a lot of challenges as well as opportunities. So a lot of opportunities to build resources, build that knowledge, transfer knowledge, also get into the research side of it, and really help not just companies, not just like students or like business leaders, but also really actively work with government or regulatory associations to bring a systematic change. So I think that would really go a long way in terms of developing the ESG field in Nepal. And thank you all for joining. It was really great to be here.
Thank you, Sandeep. I would also, all the people in the studio who have kept their camera on, I'll just bring them up together. Others haven't, if you all want to join in, please switch on your camera so we can take a nice group picture. Just a second. We have one more person with us. Yes, we have Mr. Manmeet also. He is one of our students. Hi, Manmeet.
Hello,
Yeah.
good evening, everyone.
Good
Good
evening.
evening.
So, thank you so much for joining us and really appreciate the time and efforts that you all have taken. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you, everyone.
Hi, hello, and au revoir, which means in French, see you all again.
Okay, see you all again.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Bye,
Bye.
Thank you.
bye.
Bye.